What if the spirits you've heard of in myths and horror stories weren't monsters to fear, but intelligences waiting to respond? Not to your fear, not to your words, but to your frequency. For thousands of years, the priests of Egypt, the shamans of Siberia, the witches of Europe, and the mystics of every sacred lineage knew a truth we've forgotten. Spirits aren't summoned, they're attuned to. Rituals were never about control, they were about resonance. They weren't spells of superstition. They were ancient protocols of energy alignment, symbols, chants, geometric circles, celestial timing. These were not theater, they were code. They were how humans once interfaced with the unseen layers of existence. But then it was buried, labeled evil, burned, outlawed. Why? Because when you can access divine intelligence directly, you no longer need the middleman. So ask yourself, if you could communicate with the invisible world, what or who would you be calling in? And more importantly, would you be ready to meet what answers? Part 1. The Ancient Art of Spirit Contact. Long before the word spirit was ever spoken, humanity was already listening. Not with ears, but with soul. From the temples of ancient Egypt to the mountaintops of Greece, from Sufi mystics in the desert to Kabbalists in hidden chambers. There were always those who knew how to reach beyond the veil. But they didn't call it summoning. They called it alignment. Because to call something in, you must first become a match for it. In Egypt, high priests entered trance through breath, incense, sacred geometry, not to control a force, but to enter its frequency. They worked with the Net Jeru, archetypal intelligences woven into nature itself. Their rituals were not superstition, they were precision. Timed with celestial movements, aligned with specific planetary hours. Everything had purpose: the oil, the chant, the gesture, the circle. The circle wasn't drawn to protect them from spirits. It was to stabilize the energetic field. So their intent could pierce dimensions. In Babylon, ritual magic involved sound codes and star maps. Symbols weren't decorations. They were cosmic signatures, inscribed with intent. In Greece, theurgists didn't beg gods. They became vessels of divine forces. To summon Hermes wasn't to call a person, it was to activate communication itself within your consciousness. Likewise, the Kabbalists mapped angelic hierarchies and vibratory pathways using sacred names. Each Hebrew letter carried a precise resonance. And to speak a name like Metatron or Raphael was to tune your soul into that being's domain. Even the Sufis, far from temples and tools, used only one thing: remembrance. The repetition of the divine name, zikr, wasn't a chant. It was a calibration, a rising frequency, until the space between worlds grew thin. These weren't ghost stories. They were systems. They knew spirits are not out there. They're always present, but only visible to those who vibrate at their level. And this is the forgotten truth. You don't summon spirits by command. You invite them by resonance. A ritual is not a spell. It's a mirror. It reflects your emotional state, your clarity, your purity of intent. Fear becomes a beacon for distortion, but clarity, it's the signal spirits trust. Because spirit contact is not a spectacle. It's a frequency exchange. The ancient magician didn't ask, "How do I summon?" They asked, "What part of me must awaken to meet this force?" And this is what modern seekers often miss: the symbols, the chants, the candles. They're not the power, You are. They are tools. You are the transmitter. And just like tuning a radio, you only receive the energy you're already aligned with. So the real question becomes, when you open the door to the unseen, what will step through? That depends on what's already inside you. In the next part, we'll explore this frequency-based law and why your vibration is the real ritual that determines what kind of spirit responds to your call. Part 2. Entities, Egregores, and Astral Beings. Once you open the veil, you realize the spirit world isn't a monolith. It's a spectrum. Not all beings you meet beyond the veil are human. Not all are ancient, and not all are benevolent. Some are older than time, some are born from nature, and some are created by us. So who or what answers when you call? Let's begin at the simplest level, human spirits. These are souls that once walked the earth. Some still tethered by unfinished business, some serving as guides, others wandering in confusion. Then there are the elementals, spirits of nature, earth, air, fire, water. They are not fairy tales. They are conscious forces embedded in the natural world. They don't speak in language. They move through wind, spark, rhythm, and instinct. Above them are the angelic intelligences, not winged beings floating on clouds, but vast radiant frequencies of cosmic order. To invoke an angel is not to call a person, but to harmonize with a divine archetype. And just as there is light, there is shadow. These darker entities are not evil in the Hollywood sense. They are distortions, vibrations born from fear, trauma, manipulation. Some feed on chaos, others simply reflect what we refuse to face within. But not all spirits are naturally occurring. Some are constructed. Meet the egregore, a thought form so sustained by collective belief, it takes on a kind of independent life. An egregore begins as a symbol, a name, a story. But once enough, people give it energy, intention, and fear or devotion. It begins to feed, to act, to evolve. Religions have egregores. Corporations have egregores, even nations. They are psychic structures formed by the masses, but sometimes they become the ones doing the influencing. In magical traditions, practitioners take this a step further by creating servitors, personal spirit constructs, programmed with intent, fed by ritual, and bound to specific purposes. These are like magical AI, crafted from focused thought, charged with energy, and released to perform tasks in the astral field. Some call this dangerous, others call it genius. But the line between creation and chaos is thin. You see, when you engage with these beings, whether ancient, elemental, or man-made, it's not your words they hear, it's your frequency. Entities don't respond to English, Latin, or Hebrew. They respond to resonance, emotion, conviction, clarity. This is why ancient rituals always began with purification. Because your inner state is the invitation. You cannot deceive a spirit with pretty words, but you can draw them in by becoming the frequency they understand. So, before you call, ask yourself, what are you vibrating? Every entity in the spirit world is a tuning fork, silent until struck by resonance. And in the next part, we'll dive into the mechanics of that resonance, how rituals, symbols, and intention shift your frequency to open the gate and decide who comes through it. Part 3. The mechanics of summoning. Contact doesn't happen by accident, and in the unseen world, intention without structure is danger. That's where ritual comes in. not as superstition, not as theatre, but as precise energetic architecture. Rituals are not for the spirits, they're for you to shift your field, stabilize your mind, and calibrate your frequency to match the entity you're calling. Because every spirit operates on a specific bandwidth. And to connect, your energy must resonate like a tuning fork. Let's break this down. Direction matters: east for air, south for fire, west for water, north for earth. Each carries archetypal energy, amplifying or balancing the intention of your call. Time matters. Lunar phases, planetary hours, even astrological alignments. Ancient magicians waited weeks to summon at the exact moment when the cosmos echoed their goal. Sound matters. Chants, mantras, tones. These aren't just noise. They're frequency codes, activating subtle layers of consciousness and creating vibrational gateways. Symbols matter. Sigils, circles, sacred geometry. Not just pretty designs, each one a mathematical spell designed to hold energy, focus intent, and encode the space around you. And then there's the most important element of all, your state of consciousness. Because summoning doesn't happen in the logical mind, it happens in altered states. Hypnagogic trances, breath-induced ecstasy, lucid dream work, or deep meditative absorption. You don't just light candles and hope, you become the beacon. You tune yourself like an instrument until your entire body is vibrating with the intention you've encoded. Only then does the door open. And when it does, you must be prepared. That's why magical systems emphasize protective circles, not as cages to trap spirits, but as energetic boundaries to stabilize your frequency and define the terms of interaction. The circle is your interface. It protects, it amplifies, it instructs, and at its center is clarity of intent. Spirits don't respond to pleading. They respond to precision. Who are you calling? Why are you calling them? What are you offering in return? If your signal is unclear, you might attract something else. And this is the danger. Summoning without purpose is like dialing a random number and letting whatever picks up walk through your door. That's why practitioners are taught. Never call what you can't contain. Never invite what you don't understand. Never open what you can't close. Because the spiritual realms operate under ancient laws, not human ones. But if approached with respect, alignment, and truth, they respond. And when they do, what happens next is not chaos, it's communion. But if this practice is so precise, so ancient, so empowering, then why did the world forget it? Why were these rituals demonized, erased, and buried beneath centuries of fear? That's where we're going next. Part 4. Demonization and the hidden war on spirit work. If summoning spirits is an ancient art, why has it been twisted into something dark? Why are rituals feared and those who perform them labeled heretics? The truth has less to do with spirits and more to do with power. In ancient Egypt, Greece, Mesopotamia, contact with the unseen was sacred. Priests invoked gods. Mystics communed with angelic intelligences. Rituals weren't magic tricks, they were cosmic alignments. But as empires rose, a dangerous idea took root. Control the gateway to the divine. Control the people. And so began the demonization. The church and state declared all spirit contact outside their doctrine as evil. Sigils became satanic. Sacred words were branded as witchcraft, and the ancient guides, once seen as allies, were turned into monsters. Why? Because if you could summon truth for yourself, You wouldn't need a priest. You wouldn't need permission. You'd be sovereign, and nothing threatens control systems more than a sovereign soul. So they burned the books, they hunted the mystics, they rewrote the language of spirit work into superstition and sin. But no fire can burn a truth written in vibration, and here's what they didn't expect. The knowledge survived. In hidden grimoires, secret orders, whispered lineages. The old ways never died. They adapted. Kabbalists, Sufis, Tantrikas. They preserved the ethics of real summoning, not domination, but alignment. Because the true practitioner doesn't force spirits to obey. They honor, they invite, they listen. Summoning was never about power over others. It was about power within, the power to commune with the field of consciousness that surrounds all life. But that terrified institutions. Because when you can talk to the universe directly, you stop obeying men in robes. You stop living in fear, and that's what they couldn't allow. They created a false binary, God or devil, light or darkness, obedience or hell, everything in between, forbidden. But the mystics always knew. The real spirit world is not black and white. It's a spectrum, a frequency field, and those who know how to tune it can access ancient truths that no system of power can censor. So ask yourself, why were they so afraid of this knowledge? Why did they kill those who remembered how to work with it? And most importantly, what would happen if you remembered too? Because summoning was never about commanding demons. It was about summoning yourself, your will, your essence, your connection to the infinite. And now, it's time to reclaim what was once stolen. But to truly summon with clarity, you must first know your soul. That's where we go next. Part 5. The Sacred Path. Calling in, not calling upon. What if summoning was never about calling spirits to you, but becoming a space they're drawn into? In ancient traditions, the most powerful summoners weren't those who shouted the loudest. They were the ones who aligned the deepest. They understood a truth we've forgotten. You don't summon power by demanding it. You invite it by resonating with it. Because spirits, true ones, don't respond to fear or force. They respond to frequency. This is the sacred shift. You don't call upon, you call in. You become the vessel, the field, the invitation. Real summoning is not about commanding beings to appear. It's about clearing the static so presence can flow through you. Let's redefine summoning. It's not controlling something out there. It's awakening something in here. And when your inner state becomes coherent, calm, focused, open, the unseen begins to respond. Angelic invocation, not begging, but calling sacred names with clean intent. Michael for protection, Raphael for healing, Gabriel for truth. Each name, each syllable, is a vibrational code, but it only activates if your heart is steady and your will is clear. Soul retrieval, a practice to call back fragmented parts of yourself. The lost, the shamed, the forgotten. Because the more of yourself you reclaim, the less you need external forces to complete you. Ancestral alignment, not worship, resonance. Lighting a candle, speaking a name, not to summon, but to remember. Some guides live not in the sky, but in your blood. And here's the deepest truth. The most powerful entity you can summon is your highest self. Not the version you present to the world, but the one who never forgot. The one who knew magic before you learned doubt. Because the sacred path isn't about calling spirits like tools. It's about becoming so attuned, so real, so present, that spirit has no choice but to rise within you. Picture this. No chant, no music, just breath and stillness. A soul sits alone between two worlds. A candle flickers. A name is whispered, not to control, not to impress, but to open. And the energy shifts. Not because something entered the room, but because the room became a mirror. For something ancient to return. So ask yourself, what are you truly calling in? Power, guidance, connection? Or are you ready to summon the version of you that remembers how to be the ritual itself? Because the circle, the sigil, the invocation, they were never the magic. You were, and the moment you become conscious of that, the true work begins. Final CTA. Spirits don't come to the loudest voice. They come to the clearest signal. The most powerful summoning requires no thunder, only truth. So if you feel the pull, if something ancient inside you remembers, then now is the time to return to the sacred science of spirit contact. Subscribe and walk the forgotten path with us. Because the next chapter will reveal the vibrational keys left by mystics, monks, and sages across the ages. Next episode, the most powerful mantras and their hidden effects. And what you'll hear may not just shift your energy, it might open a portal within.